The throne room of the Zephyrian Empire stretched out like a crystal cathedral. Every surface gleamed with polished metal and precious stones that caught the light from 3 different suns. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun stood at attention, his black power armor making him look like a dark shadow among the shining aliens around him. Marcus had seen many alien species during his 5 years of military service, but the Zephyrians still amazed him. They were tall and graceful, with skin that changed colors like oil on water. Their voices sounded like music when they spoke. Everything about them seemed perfect and beautiful. Today was important. Earth needed this peace treaty with the Zephyrian Empire. The aliens controlled 12 star systems and had technology that made human weapons look like stone tools. Without their friendship, Earth would always be alone in a dangerous galaxy. The human diplomatic team sat at a long table made from a single piece of blue crystal. Ambassador Williams, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, was trying to explain Earth's position on mining rights in the outer territories. The conversation had been going well until they reached the topic of military cooperation. That was when Princess Lorelei spoke up. The princess was young, maybe 19 in human years, but she carried herself like she owned the universe. Her skin shifted from pale gold to deep purple as she grew more animated. She had been quiet during most of the meeting, but Marcus had noticed her staring at the human soldiers with obvious dislike. "Father," she said, her voice cutting through Ambassador Williams' careful words like a knife. "Why are we even discussing military partnerships with these creatures?" The Emperor, a massive figure on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single diamond, raised one elegant hand. "Daughter, please remember our guests." But Princess Lorelei was not finished. She stood up from her smaller throne and walked down the steps toward the human delegation. Her movements were smooth and dangerous, like a cat approaching its prey. "Look at them," she said, gesturing toward Marcus and the other 2 human soldiers. "They wrap themselves in metal like insects hiding in shells. They cannot survive in space without their machines. They cannot even breathe our air without those ridiculous helmets." The court began to whisper. Marcus could see the other aliens nodding in agreement. Some of them were smiling, showing teeth that glowed white in the strange light. Princess Lorelei stopped directly in front of Marcus. Even though she was tall for a Zephyrian, she had to look up at him. "This one," she said, pointing at Marcus like he was an object in a museum. "He stands there in his primitive armor, thinking it makes him strong. But underneath all that metal, what is he? Just soft flesh and weak bones." The whispers grew louder. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, but he kept his face blank. His training had taught him to stay calm under pressure. He had been insulted before by aliens who thought humans were inferior. It usually did not bother him much, but something about the way Princess Lorelei spoke made his jaw tighten. She was not just insulting him. She was insulting every human who had ever died protecting Earth. Every soldier who had ever put their life on the line for something bigger than themselves. "Show us," the princess continued, her voice getting louder. "Show us this amazing human military technology that we are supposed to respect." Colonel Harrison, the ranking military officer in the delegation, stood up. Marcus could see the frustration in his commander's eyes. "Your Highness, perhaps this is not the appropriate time for a demonstration." "Oh, but I think it is," Princess Lorelei replied. The colors in her skin shifted to bright red, a sign of excitement among her people. "We are being asked to trust these humans with our security. Should we not see what they are capable of?" The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. "The princess makes a fair point. Perhaps a small demonstration would be educational." Marcus felt all eyes in the room turn toward him. He was the youngest soldier in the delegation, but he was also the most heavily armed. His power armor contained the latest human technology, enhanced strength servos. advanced targeting systems, energy shields, and enough firepower to level a small building. Sergeant Chen, Colonel Harrison said quietly, give them a basic overview of your equipment capabilities. Marcus nodded and activated his suit's display systems. Holographic readouts appeared in the air around him, showing his armor specifications. He explained how the targeting system could track multiple enemies at once. He demonstrated how the energy shields could deflect incoming attacks. He showed them the enhanced strength that let him lift objects weighing several tons. But with each demonstration, Princess Lorelei's laughter grew louder. Barbaric, she said after he showed the weapon systems. You need machines to help you aim? How pathetic. Cowardly, she added when he explained the defensive capabilities. You hide behind shields instead of facing your enemies with honor. Compensation, she sneered when he lifted a heavy statue with his power gauntlets. You need machines to make you strong because nature made you weak. The court erupted in musical laughter. Even some of the human diplomats looked uncomfortable. Marcus felt something inside him snap. For 5 years, he had listened to aliens mock humanity. He had smiled politely when they called humans primitive. He had nodded respectfully when they explained how superior their technology was. He had done his duty and followed orders, even when those orders meant swallowing his pride. But today, standing in this crystal palace while a spoiled alien princess made jokes about human weakness, something changed in Marcus Chun. He reached up and began to unfasten his helmet. Sergeant, Colonel Harrison said sharply, what are you doing? Marcus did not answer. He pulled off his helmet and set it on the floor. His short black hair was messy with sweat, and his dark eyes were calm but determined. Then he started removing the rest of his armor. The throne room fell completely silent. The musical sounds of Zephyrian conversation stopped as if someone had turned off a radio. Even Princess Lorelei's laughter died in her throat as she watched. Marcus removed piece after piece of his power armor. First came the chestplate, heavy and black with glowing energy cells. Marcus set it down carefully next to his helmet. Then the arm guards, each one containing enough computer processing power to run a small city. The leg armor followed, with its complex servo systems and shock absorbers. Sergeant Chen, Colonel Harrison's voice was sharp with warning. I order you to stop this immediately. Marcus looked at his commanding officer with calm, dark eyes. With respect, sir, I am off duty in 30 seconds. He glanced at his wrist display. Actually, 27 seconds. Ambassador Williams stood up from the crystal table. Sergeant, what do you think you are doing? Marcus did not answer. He continued removing his armor with the same careful precision he used for everything else. The magnetic boots that let him walk on spaceship hulls. The life support pack that could keep him alive in vacuum for 6 hours. The communications array that could contact Earth from anywhere in the galaxy. Piece by piece. The advanced technology that made him a fearsome human soldier was stripped away. Piece by piece, he became just a man in simple military fatigues, gray pants, black t-shirt, and worn combat boots. The Zephyrians in the court began to whisper among themselves. Their skin colors shifted rapidly, a sign of confusion and growing anxiety. They had never seen a human without their technology before. None of them were sure what to expect. Princess Lorelei took a step backward. What is he doing? She asked her father. Why is he removing his protection? The emperor did not answer. His ancient eyes were fixed on Marcus with an expression that might have been curiosity or concern. Marcus finished removing the last piece of his armor and stood up straight. Without the powered exoskeleton, he looked smaller and more fragile. But there was something in his posture that made him seem taller than before. He looked like a man who had made a decision and was at peace with it. He turned toward the massive windows that dominated one wall of the throne room. Through the transparent metal, Everyone could see the crimson wastes stretching to the horizon. The desert was beautiful and terrible, with red sand dunes that shifted like ocean waves under the heat of 3 suns. Marcus began walking toward the windows. "Where are you going?" Princess Lorelei demanded. Marcus stopped and turned to face her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. "You want to know what humans are really like without our machines," he said. "You think our technology makes us weak. You believe we are nothing but soft flesh and weak bones." He gestured toward the windows. "Out there is the Crimson Wastes. Your people call it the most dangerous place on your planet. Even your best warriors need full environmental suits to survive there." The court was completely silent now. Even the soft humming of the palace's air circulation system seemed loud in the stillness. Marcus continued. "You say humans hide behind their technology. Maybe you are right. Maybe we do depend too much on our machines." He shrugged. "Let me show you what a human looks like without any machines at all." "You cannot be serious," Princess Lorelei said. But her voice had lost its mocking tone. Now she sounded genuinely alarmed. "The heat alone will kill you in minutes. The sand wraiths hunt during the day. Nothing survives out there without protection." Marcus smiled for the first time since the meeting began. It was not a happy smile, but it was genuine. "Maybe you are right," he said. "Maybe I will die out there. But at least you will know that I tried." He walked to the window control panel. It should have required royal clearance to open the barriers, but Marcus had watched the palace staff during his 3 days here. He had memorized their procedures and access codes, the way a good soldier always paid attention to his environment. The window began to slide open with a soft hiss. Immediately, the temperature in the throne room started to rise as superheated air flowed in from outside. The Zephyrians near the windows backed away, their skin shifting to alarmed shades of blue and violet. "Stop him!" Princess Lorelei shouted to the palace guards. "He will die." But the guards hesitated. They had no orders about stopping a human diplomat from walking outside. They looked to the Emperor for guidance. The massive figure on the diamond throne raised one hand. "Let him go," he said quietly. "Father," Princess Lorelei protested. "If he wishes to die for his pride, that is his choice," the Emperor replied. But his voice did not sound as confident as his words. Marcus stepped through the opening. The heat hit him like a physical blow, making his skin feel like he had walked into an oven. The air was so dry it hurt to breathe. The red sand beneath his feet was already hot enough to burn through thin shoes. He turned back to look at the throne room one last time. Everyone was staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to horror to fascination. Princess Lorelei's skin had turned completely pale, almost white. "Tell me something," Marcus said to her. "When this is over, when you know how this ends, ask yourself one question." "What question?" She whispered. "Ask yourself which one of us was really hiding behind technology." Marcus turned his back on the Crystal Palace and began walking into the Crimson Wastes. Behind him, he heard Princess Lorelei calling for the medical teams to monitor his life signs. He heard Colonel Harrison shouting orders. He heard Ambassador Williams demanding that someone stop this madness, but Marcus did not look back. He had a point to prove, not to the Zephyrians, but to himself. For 5 years, he had been a soldier wrapped in machines. Now, he would find out what kind of man existed underneath all that technology. The red sand stretched endlessly ahead of him. The 3 suns beat down like hammers. Somewhere in the distance, something howled, the hunting cry of a sand wraith. Marcus Chun kept walking. The monitoring station in the palace had been designed to track Zephyrian research teams in the Crimson Wastes. It could measure body temperature, heart rate, breathing patterns, and dozens of other vital signs from great distances. Right now, Every screen was focused on one human walking alone across the red desert. Princess Lorelei stood in front of the main display, her hands pressed against the cool metal surface. Her skin kept shifting colors as her emotions changed. Fear, curiosity, anger, and something she could not quite identify. "How long?" she asked the chief medical officer. Dr. Kalani, an elderly Zephyrian with silver skin and kind eyes, studied the readouts. "For a human? In this heat? Without any protection?" He shook his head sadly. "Maybe 10 minutes before heat exhaustion. 20 at the absolute maximum." On the screen, Marcus was a small, dark figure against the red landscape. The temperature outside was already over 200 degrees. The humidity was so low that exposed water would boil away in seconds. The ultraviolet radiation from 3 suns was strong enough to cause severe burns in minutes. "His heart rate is elevated," Dr. Kalani reported. "His core temperature is rising rapidly. This will be over soon." But 10 minutes passed and Marcus kept walking. How is this possible? Princess Lorelei whispered. Marcus had found a rhythm. He moved steadily, but not quickly, conserving his energy. He had pulled his black t-shirt over his head like a hood, protecting his neck and face from the direct sunlight. His breathing was deep and controlled, something he had learned during survival training in Earth's Sahara Desert. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Marcus was still alive. "His vital signs are stabilizing," Dr. Kalani said, confusion clear in his voice. "I do not understand. No unprotected being should survive this environment." The Emperor had joined them at the monitoring station. His massive form cast a shadow over the smaller figures around him. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we do not know humans as well as we thought." Marcus was using techniques learned from studying Earth's harshest environments. He walked in the shadows of the larger sand dunes when possible. He recognized the signs of dangerous ground areas where the sand was too hot even for him. He read the wind patterns to avoid the worst of the heat shimmer. Most importantly, he was doing something the Zephyrians had never seen before. He was adapting in real time. When his military boots became too hot, he wrapped his feet in strips torn from his shirt. When the direct sunlight became unbearable, he learned to recognize the subtle shadows cast by low ridges in the sand. When his mouth became too dry to swallow, he discovered he could create small amounts of moisture by breathing through his nose and keeping his mouth tightly closed. 1 hour passed. Then 2. "This is impossible," Dr. Kalani muttered. "No one survives the Crimson Wastes without environmental protection. No one." Princess Lorelei could not look away from the screen. The small dark figure kept moving across the red landscape with steady determination. Several times, she thought she saw him stumble or fall, but he always got back up. "What kind of training do humans receive?" she asked. Colonel Harrison, who had been standing silently behind them, finally spoke. "Standard survival training covers desert, jungle, Arctic, and urban environments. But this," he gestured at the screen, "this goes beyond training. This is pure human stubbornness." 3 hours after Marcus had walked into the desert, the first sand wraith appeared. The creatures were native to the Crimson Wastes, perfectly adapted to hunt in the extreme heat. They looked like a cross between a shark and a giant centipede, with armored hide that reflected heat and dozens of needle-sharp legs that could move them across sand faster than most vehicles. They hunted by sensing vibrations in the ground. They were nearly invisible, their skin changing color to match the red sand around them. Even Zephyrian sensors had trouble detecting them until they attacked. "Movement on the northern scope," a technician reported. Sand wraith approaching the human's position. The court held its breath. Princess Lorelei found herself leaning forward, her hands clenched into fists. On the screen, Marcus suddenly stopped walking. He stood completely still for several long seconds, his head tilted slightly to one side. Then, without warning, he took 3 quick steps to his left. The sand exploded where he had been standing a moment before. A massive sand wraith burst from beneath the surface, its jaws snapping shut on empty air. For a moment, it was completely exposed, confused by missing its target. Marcus did not run. Instead, he picked up a handful of the hottest sand he could find and threw it directly into the creature's eyes. The sand wraith shrieked and dove back underground, temporarily blinded. How did he know? Princess Lurelei whispered. Vibrations through his feet, Colonel Harrison explained. Marcus grew up on a farm in rural Kansas. He used to hunt prairie dogs by feeling their tunnel movements underground. It is an old human skill. The sand wraith tried 2 more attacks. Each time, Marcus sensed the approach and moved just enough to avoid the creature's jaws. After the 3rd failed attempt, the frustrated predator gave up and disappeared into the depths of the desert. Incredible, Dr. Kalani breathed. He detected and evaded a sand wraith without any sensors or weapons. But the real test was yet to come. As the 3 suns began to set, the temperature started to drop. In the Crimson Wastes, nighttime was just as deadly as day, but for the opposite reason. The temperature would fall to nearly 100 degrees below zero. Without the heat of the suns, the desert became a frozen wasteland. Princess Lurelei watched Marcus find shelter against a large rock formation as darkness fell. Now he will freeze, she said. Surely no one can survive both extremes. But Marcus had learned to adapt. He dug a shallow depression in the sand next to the rocks, creating a windbreak. He used his remaining clothes to create insulation. Most importantly, he began to exercise. He did push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks. He shadowboxed against invisible opponents. He kept his muscles moving and his blood flowing. When he got too tired to exercise, he did breathing techniques that generated body heat from within. Where did he learn this? Princess Lurelei asked. Probably from our Special Forces cold weather training, Colonel Harrison replied. Though I have to admit, I have never seen anyone apply it quite like this. All through the long frozen night, Marcus kept moving. Sometimes he jogged in place. Sometimes he did yoga poses. Sometimes he just shivered violently, but he never stopped fighting the cold. When the suns rose again, he was still alive. Dr. Kalani stared at his instruments in amazement. His core body temperature never dropped below survivable levels. I did not understand how this is possible. Princess Lurelei had been watching the monitors for nearly 18 hours. Her advisors had tried to get her to rest, but she could not leave. Something about the small figure on the screen fascinated her in a way she could not explain. He's not just surviving, she said quietly. He is learning. Each challenge makes him stronger. The Emperor placed one massive hand on his daughter's shoulder. Perhaps, he said thoughtfully, this is what primitive really means. Not weak or simple, but fundamental, essential, pure. As the 2nd day began, Marcus stood up from his shelter and looked around at the endless red landscape. His clothes were torn and dirty. His skin was burned by the sun and chapped by the cold. But his eyes were clear and determined. He began walking again, deeper into the crimson wastes. Princess Lurelei realized that her understanding of humans had been completely wrong. They were not weak creatures hiding behind technology. They were something much more dangerous. They were survivors who refused to give up, no matter how impossible the situation became. And Marcus Chen was showing them exactly what that meant. On the 2nd day, Marcus discovered he was not alone in the Crimson Wastes. The emergency beacon was weak, barely detectable even by his trained senses. But Marcus had learned to pay attention to every detail in this deadly environment. The faint electronic beeping was coming from behind a cluster of red stone formations about half a mile from his path. He could have ignored it. His original plan was to walk straight across the desert to prove his point about human survival. Taking a detour would cost him precious time and energy. In a place where every calorie mattered, where every drop of sweat could mean the difference between life and death. The smart choice was to keep walking. But Marcus had never been good at making the smart choice. When someone needed help, the crash site was worse than he had expected. A small Zephyrian research vessel lay twisted among the rocks, its silver hull split open like a broken egg. The emergency beacon was flashing weakly from inside the wreckage, powered by failing backup systems. 3 aliens were huddled in the shadow of their destroyed ship. Marcus recognized them as Altarians, a species known for their scientific abilities. They were smaller than Zephyrians, with blue-gray skin and large eyes adapted for low-light environments. Right now, those large eyes were filled with despair. "Hello," Marcus called out in Galactic Standard language. "Do you need assistance?" The eldest Altarian, a female with intricate tattoos covering her arms, looked up in shock. "A human? Here? How is this possible?" Marcus walked closer, staying alert for any signs of danger. The Altarians' environmental suits were clearly failing. He could see warning lights flashing on their chest displays, and their movements were sluggish from heat exhaustion. "Our transport crashed during the night," the female explained. Dr. Vuran was injured in the impact. She gestured to a younger male who was lying unconscious against the wreckage. "Our suits are losing power. The emergency transmitter has been broadcasting for 8 hours, but no one has responded." Marcus knelt beside the injured Altarian and checked his vital signs. He had learned basic first aid from multiple alien species during his military service. Dr. Vuran had a concussion and a broken arm, but nothing immediately life-threatening. "How long before your suits fail completely?" Marcus asked. The third alien, a young female who could not have been much older than Princess Lorelei, checked her readings. "Maybe 6 more hours for Dr. Thesa and me. Dr. Viren's suit has been damaged. He has perhaps 2 hours." Marcus did some quick calculations in his head. The palace was at least 15 hours away at his current pace. Even if rescue teams were dispatched immediately, they would never arrive in time. The Altarians would die long before help could reach them, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was that saving them would probably kill him in the monitoring station at the palace. Princess Lorelei watched this drama unfold with growing amazement. The technical teams had detected the crash site 12 hours ago, but the Emperor had decided not to send a rescue mission. The Crimson Wastes were too dangerous, and the 3 scientists had known the risks when they began their research expedition. "He found the crash site," Dr. Kalani reported. "He is communicating with the survivors." "What is his physiological status?" the Emperor asked while Dr. Kalani studied his instruments. "Remarkable. He is dehydrated and exhausted, but his vital signs remain stable. At his current rate of water loss, he could survive perhaps 1 more day in the desert." Princess Lorelei leaned closer to the screen. "But if he helps them, if he shares his resources or takes them with him, his survival time will be cut dramatically," Dr. Kalani confirmed. "He might have only hours left." The court fell silent as they watched Marcus examine the crashed transport. He spent several minutes studying the wreckage, apparently looking for something specific. "What is he doing?" Princess Lorelei asked. Colonel Harrison had been monitoring the situation from the communication station. "If I know Marcus, he's figuring out how to save them." Marcus found what he was looking for: the ship's solar collection array. It had been damaged in the crash, but about half of the photovoltaic cells were still intact. With careful work, he could strip them from the wreckage and use them to recharge the Altarians' failing suits. The work was brutal in the heat of the day. The metal was too hot to touch with bare hands, so Marcus had to wrap his remaining shirt around his fingers. Every movement sent waves of superheated air across his already burned skin. Sweat poured from his body faster than he could replace it. But he kept working. "This is madness," Dr. Thesa whispered as she watched Marcus risk his life to save theirs. "Why is he doing this? We are strangers to him. Our species have barely even met." Marcus looked up from his work, his face red and streaming with sweat. "Where I come from," he said simply, "we help people who need help. It does not matter what species they are." It took him 3 hours to create a working solar charger. By the time he finished, his hands were badly burned, and he was showing serious signs of heat exhaustion. But the device worked. The Altarian suits began to charge their power cells from the 3 suns overhead. "There," Marcus said, wiping sweat from his eyes. "That should give you enough power to survive until rescue arrives." "But what about you?" asked Dr. Thesa. "You have used up too much of your strength. You cannot continue your journey in this condition." Marcus managed a weak smile. "I will be fine. I just need to rest for a while." But everyone watching from the palace knew that was not true. His vital signs showed severe dehydration and the beginning stages of heat stroke. Without immediate medical attention, Marcus Chun would die in the Crimson Wastes. Princess Lirelei had been silent for the past hour, watching this display of selfless behavior with growing confusion. Everything she had been taught about humans suggested they were selfish, primitive creatures who cared only about their own survival. Yet here was a human dying to save 3 aliens he had never met before. "I do not understand," she said quietly. "He is sacrificing his life for strangers. Why would any rational being do such a thing?" The Emperor, who had been watching with ancient eyes that had seen many species rise and fall, finally spoke. "Perhaps, daughter, rationality is not the highest virtue a species can possess." On the screen, Dr. Vern had regained consciousness. When he learned what Marcus had done, he insisted on sharing his suit's water supply with the human who had saved their lives. "I cannot accept this," Marcus protested weakly. "You need that water for yourselves. And we need you alive," Dr. Thesa replied firmly. "You saved our lives. Now let us help save yours." The young Altarian scientist, Dr. Keela, had been studying Marcus with the same intensity she usually reserved for her research specimens. "Dr. Thesa," she said suddenly, "I think I understand something about humans now." "What is that?" "They are not trying to prove they are stronger than us," Dr. Keela said, her voice filled with wonder. "They are trying to prove they are better than themselves." In the monitoring station, Princess Lorelei felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in her 19 years of life, she was beginning to understand that strength and intelligence were not the same thing as wisdom and courage. Marcus Chen had walked into the Crimson Wastes to prove a point about human nature. But he was proving something much more important than he had intended. He was showing the galaxy what it meant to be truly civilized. And Princess Lorelei was finally ready to listen. On the morning of the 3rd day, something appeared on the horizon that made the entire palace hold its breath. 4 figures were walking slowly across the red sand toward the Crystal City. 3 were clearly Altarian, their blue-gray skin and distinctive body shape visible even at a distance. The 4th figure was taller, darker, and moving with the careful determination of someone who had pushed their body far beyond its normal limits. "Marcus," Princess Lorelei whispered. Her hands pressed against the observation window. Dr. Kalani was frantically checking his instruments. "How is this possible? According to my calculations, he should have died yesterday. No one could survive this long in the wastes while carrying injured companions and sharing resources." But there they were, Marcus Chun and 3 Altarian scientists, alive against all odds and walking towards safety. The rescue had not been easy. Dr. Vern, still weak from his injuries, had needed to be carried for most of the journey. The 2 female scientists, Dr. Thesa, and Dr. Keela had shared their remaining water with Marcus, but it was barely enough for one person, let alone four. Marcus had solved the problem the way he solved everything, by adapting and refusing to give up. He had figured out how to travel during the cooler hours of dawn and dusk, resting during the worst heat of midday. He had learned to recognize the subtle signs of underground water sources, finding tiny amounts of moisture in rock crevices and beneath certain types of desert plants. Most importantly, he had kept the group's spirits up when exhaustion and despair threatened to overwhelm them. "He carried me for 6 hours yesterday," Dr. Vern was saying into his suit's communicator, broadcasting to the palace. "When I told him to leave me behind, he just smiled and said that was not how humans did things." Princess Lorelei felt something strange happening in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize the emotion: shame. For 3 days, she had been watching a primitive, barbaric human do things that her own people considered impossible. He had survived without technology, adapted to deadly conditions, and risked his life to save strangers, and she had called him weak. The Emperor had been silent for most of the morning, but now he spoke. "Daughter, I think it is time you met this human properly." Princess Lorelei nodded. For the first time in her life, she was not sure what to say to someone. All her usual words of command and dismissal seemed small and foolish, now that the palace medical team met the group at the main entrance. Marcus was clearly in bad shape, sunburned, dehydrated, and barely able to stand. But he insisted on making sure the Altarians were treated first before accepting any help for himself. "Please," Dr. Keela was saying to the medics, "take care of him first. He saved our lives." "I am fine," Marcus replied, though his voice was hoarse and weak. "Just need some water and a place to sit down." Princess Lorelei waited in the entrance hall, her royal robes feeling heavy and uncomfortable. When Marcus finally appeared, supported by 2 medical assistants, she barely recognized him. His face was dark with sunburn, his clothes were torn and stained, and his eyes were surrounded by deep lines of exhaustion. But there was something in those eyes that had not been there 3 days ago. A quiet satisfaction, as if he had answered a question that had been bothering him for a long time. "Sergeant Chun," Princess Lorelei said formally. "The court welcomes your safe return." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was genuine. "Thank you, Your Highness." "I owe you an apology," Princess Lorelei said. The words came out in a rush, as if she was afraid she would lose courage if she spoke slowly. "I was wrong about humans. I was wrong about you. I said terrible things because I did not understand." Marcus nodded slowly. "What did you not understand?" Princess Lorelei looked around the entrance hall at all the beautiful technology that surrounded them. The crystal walls that controlled temperature and humidity automatically. The gravity generators that made walking comfortable for dozens of different alien species. The energy shields that protected them from radiation and meteor strikes. "I thought strength meant having better tools," she said quietly. "I thought intelligence meant building better machines. I thought civilization meant—" She gestured helplessly at the gleaming palace around them. "All of this, and now?" Marcus asked. Princess Lorelei met his eyes. "Now I think maybe civilization means knowing when to put down your tools and help someone who needs help." Dr. Keela, who had been listening from nearby, stepped forward. "Your Highness, if I may, we have been studying humans for 3 days now, watching Sergeant Chun survive impossible conditions. We think we understand something about his species." "What is that?" "They do not see technology as a replacement for character," Dr. Keela explained. "They see it as a tool to express character. When Sergeant Chun took off his armor, he was not abandoning his strength. He was showing us where his real strength came from. Marcus looked embarrassed by the attention. I just did what seemed right at the time. That is exactly the point, Princess Lirelei said. She was beginning to understand something that had never occurred to her before. You did not calculate the odds or analyze the situation. You did not ask for permission or wait for orders. You just did what was right. The Emperor appeared in the entrance hall, his massive presence filling the space with calm authority. Sergeant Chen, he said formally, the Zephyrian Empire owes you a debt for saving the lives of our scientific colleagues. Marcus straightened up as much as his exhausted condition allowed. No debt necessary, Your Majesty. I was glad to help. Nevertheless, the Emperor continued, your actions have given us much to think about regarding the nature of true strength. He looked at his daughter with ancient, knowing eyes. Perhaps some of us have learned important lessons about judging others by their technology rather than their character. The peace negotiations resumed that afternoon, but the tone was completely different. The Altarian scientists had spread word throughout the palace about what Marcus had done in the desert. Alien diplomats who had previously dismissed humans as primitive now listened carefully to every word from the Earth delegation. More importantly, Princess Lirelei had insisted on personally apologizing to every member of the human team. She had also requested permission to attend all future meetings, saying she had much to learn about species she had misunderstood as the treaty was finally signed. Princess Lirelei found herself standing next to Marcus on the observation deck. He was wearing his power armor again, fully restored and ready for duty. But somehow, the armor looked different now. Less like a shell he was hiding behind, and more like tools he was choosing to use. Sergeant Chun, she said quietly, may I ask you something? Of course, Your Highness. When you walked into the desert, what were you trying to prove? Marcus thought for a moment, watching the red sands of the crimson wastes through the crystal windows. I was not trying to prove anything to you, he said finally. I was trying to prove something to myself. What was that? That I was not my equipment. That who I am comes from inside, not from the machines I use. He smiled slightly. I guess you could say I was trying to prove I was not afraid to be human. Princess Lirelei nodded slowly. And what does it mean to be human? Marcus looked at her with those calm, dark eyes that had seen the worst the universe could offer and had refused to surrender. It means you help people when they need help, even if it costs you something. It means you do not give up, even when giving up would be easier. It means you choose to be better than you have to be. Princess Lirelei felt tears in her eyes, though she was not sure why. I called you primitive. Maybe I am, Marcus replied. But maybe primitive just means we remember what is really important. As the sun set over the crimson wastes, casting long shadows across the crystal palace, Princess Lirelei realized that her understanding of civilization had been completely backwards. True advancement was not about building better machines or developing superior technology. True advancement was about becoming the kind of people who were worthy of the tools they created. And maybe, just maybe, the humans were further along that path than anyone else in the galaxy had realized. The treaty between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire was signed that evening. But more importantly, a young alien princess had learned that strength without compassion was just another form of weakness. And that sometimes the most advanced thing you could do was remember how to be simply, essentially, courageously human. Marcus Chen had walked into the desert to prove a point about human nature. He had succeeded beyond his wildest expectations, not by showing how strong humans were, but by showing how good they could choose to be.